In this video, we will be building a 60 foot by 60 foot building, and the building will not have any engineered roof trusses, and it will have two large doors. These are 12 foot by 12 foot wide, and even though I don't have any windows or doors anywhere else throughout the building, this doesn't mean that you can't put them in or that I won't put them in on a future project. And since the building will require some posts and beams, we are going to need some footings, and sometimes these footings will need to be poured first, especially if you're going to have a difficult time positioning them after you've poured the concrete. However, there are ways to position the framing hardware that goes into the concrete so that you can pour everything at once, and I will provide you with some of that information in the future, hopefully, and if I forget, let me know in the comment area. And our post to beam connectors, go ahead and get another view there, and the post to the foundation connectors. And remember, it's nice to have the bottom of the wood post a little bit off the ground, even if you're going to have a situation like this where the post is going to be located on the inside of the building. And the top of this beam right here will be even or level with the top of this one, and the same for these two beams. Let's go ahead and remove the posts and beams and take a look at our gable wall. And the blocks mid-span at an angle all the way up. However, you might need to install additional rows of blocking, and I will go over that in a future video. Our beam pocket, the upper beam pocket. Take a look at it from the other side. I will be using 2x6 for this wall and 2x4 for these walls because of the height. It's just something I'm not feeling comfortable with. And this is where our ridge is going to connect to. And we will have double trimmers underneath each side of the header. And you can see here where the 2x6 wall is going to be on each side, and then back to a 2x4 wall. And as always, don't forget that you might need to contact a structural engineer to design a project like this in your area. And this wall right here is going to be built the same as this side over here. And sometimes that makes the job a little easier. Not too exciting here, 16 inches on center. And then you can install any windows wherever you want to in those walls. And we don't need to go over this wall here. It is exactly the same as this one over here. And that's the beauty of this design. These walls will be the same, the front, the back, the sides, along with a lot of the other framing components, the posts and the beams, where we are going to use 16 footers all the way to here. And if you wanted to make the building 4 foot larger to where 16 footers would work all the way across, then that might be another option. Let's go ahead and take a look at how the beams connect into the wall framing. And the beams are going to be a little bit taller because we're going to have our rafter seat cuts intersect in these sections. Let's go ahead and install the rafters on this side first. And you don't have to build it this way. You don't need to build this section first and then this section. You can use whatever method you feel is going to work best for you. Let's go ahead and zoom in here. Take a look at the seat cut, the notches for the fascia board lookouts, and our exposed rafter blocks that will be underneath the eaves. And the seat cuts up above should be the same size as the seat cuts below. Otherwise, you're going to need to compensate for that in the framing. A view of the blocks. Again, these blocks will be exposed underneath the fascia board or the eaves. And our rafters are 24 inches on center and will lap over the beams. This will provide us with a nice structural connection. Put a few nails in on each side, and we have shaped blocks that will provide us with a nice way to connect the sheathing to the blocks and again make the engineer happy. It's always nice to keep the engineer and the building inspectors happy. And after you have done both sections here, you can go ahead and start on the middle. And to build something like this, you might need to build some scaffolding. And if it was me, I would just build a section of scaffolding and then move it as I was working. No need to build an entire section of scaffolding there to frame this section of the roof. Let's go ahead and take a look at our blocks. And again, the rafters are lapping. And again, we're using the shaped blocks throughout the building. And this view provides us with the rafters lapping. This rafter here, the upper rafter and the lower rafter line up, and then the middle rafter laps on this side. You can lap it on this side, whatever side is going to work better for your sheathing span. And a good example of that would be if I had a 2-foot spacing for the rafter here, I might need to place this rafter on this side so that I don't end up with a larger span here than required by the plywood manufacturer or the engineer. Nice view of the plumb cuts there in the rafters. And make sure that your ridge overhangs. This really isn't a good place for a block, even though I see that a lot. Someone just goes ahead and puts a block here, and that might not be that big of a deal if your lookouts are a little closer to the ridge. Next up, let's go ahead and install our 2x4 lookouts. They will be spaced 32 inches on center. However, yours might be allowed to be spaced farther apart or closer together. Let's go ahead and install the fascia board and take a tour of the fascia board, connecting to the ridge at the top, providing us with a nice cantilever connection. And since we need a break in the fascia board, we need to connect two pieces together. That usually connects something like this so that we can nail both pieces of the fascia board into the 2x4. And try to make sure you get some good nailing here to make sure that the fascia board doesn't pull apart. I've seen that happen more than once. Fascia at the bottom, we have a 12-inch overhang this way. We have a 2-foot overhang this way. And a nice miter here, and the fascia board will connect to the rafters like this, the same way that it did at the lookout. And make sure that everything is nice and straight here. Sometimes if you're off a little bit on long buildings like this, you could end up with a visual eyesore. I've seen that a lot with siding. I remember I did a wall that was over 90 feet long. And I was using a certain type of siding that is thin. It's a popular siding today. I'm not going to name it. But from it bowing and warping, it didn't do me any favors. I got to say that. So that's it for the fascia board. Let's go ahead and install our rafter ties. We're going to need something at the top here, unless we put a ridge beam in. And I went ahead and installed a couple of 2x4 braces this way to help hold the rafter tie up. And I know some of you are confused. You actually think that this brace is to provide additional support for the roof rafter. And in some cases it might, but that's usually not what we're looking at. These vertical supports are usually used to prevent the rafter ties from sagging, normally due to just simply the weight of the lumber and the distance that it is spanning. For example, a 2x4 is probably going to sag a little farther in 20 foot than a 2x8 will. And of course our collar ties there. And I'm not really doing this in order. You're probably going to handle all of this while you have your scaffolding built and you're building that section of the upper roof. Next up, let's install the roof sheathing. We are almost done with our tour here. And if you have any questions at all, feel free to leave them in the comment area and I will try to answer them as soon as possible.